Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to your corner here at the Four Corner Society. I am your host, Ben, and we're going to be continuing our very final installment of the spell tier list guides for Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition. I'm a little excited right now for two reasons. One, the Witchcraft spell class specifically is literally my favorite class in Divinity Original Sin, probably tied up there with Man at Arms. And then secondly, Larian Studios. Baldur's Gate 3 is releasing tomorrow. That is right. Tomorrow, I get to play the game I've been waiting for a long time. So I personally am very excited about that, and I am excited to deliver upon the promise of content related to that specific game, and also to finish up this series here with Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition. If there are any games that you want me to create guides for or create content around, just comment down in the comment section below, and I'll go ahead and I'll make sure to look into those and make some content that I think is relevant to you guys for that specific reason. But without further ado, we are going to get into the novice spells. As a reminder, this is like for your generic kind of witchcraft mage, or just how majority of the times the spells should be more beneficial for you. When you have 5 ranks in each whatever class you're going for, in this case witchcraft, you can have 6 novice spells, 4 adept spells, and 2 master spells. Now, which with witchcraft, they're very diverse in their master spells because there's 5 of them that they offer. But they have two I would say, specific playstyles. They have weaken your opponents and strengthen your allies, and they also have some, I want to say, pseudo crowd control abilities as well, which I think is really cool. So we'll hop right into it. I'll give you my takes on it, and we can, you guys can agree with it or you cannot agree with it. It doesn't matter to me. Just let me know in the comments. We can have a discussion. All right. So first up, guys, we have the Decaying Touch. Make a target decay so that it cannot be healed by magic or potions anymore. It will be damaged instead, and it has a 5-meter range. So the range on it is very lacking, in my opinion. If you wanted to have like a witchcraft mage who's a little further back from the fight, it might be a little hard to get them into range to cast this specific spell, but the ability of it is really good. Early on in combat, you don't see, or early on in the game, I should say, you don't see encounters using potions or using regeneration scrolls or things like that. You don't really see a use for it. Maybe if you go up to tactician level, they will start utilizing those a lot more. Obviously, there's more enemies. The encounters are more challenging. But when you play through just like your kind of standard playthrough, they don't start actually using those kind of potions and stuff until later on. So this can become useful. Say if you are trying to like one-shot the boss, or you go into a boss encounter, there's a really big enemy. It is very frustrating when you do all that damage and then they use a potion to heal it all the way back up, or they have a mage character that just heals them and you're just sitting there like, what do I do? I would go ahead and put this in the B tier, because the main thing I would say that the witchcraft is good for is buffing your allies and debuffing their resistances towards crowd control. So this isn't necessarily a resistance debuff to crowd control, so I would put it in the B tier. Next up, we have the lower resistances. Speaking of resistances, I should say, decreases all elemental resistances of enemies around you. What it does is it decreases fire, earth, air, water, and poison resistances by 20%, and it has a 8-meter radius. So what that means is if you have a weapon that has like 20 poison damage on it, you use this, it would do a little bit more damage because they're not super resistant to that. So a lot of the weapons that you get in Divinity do have that aspect to it. So I don't see this as really bad. I actually see this in the B tier. The fact that it's a resistance and not a like a willpower or bodybuilding lowering or debuff on the enemy, I don't find it super like amazing. But the fact that you can just increase your damage potential by at least 20% is actually kind of a big deal. Also, if you're running, say, a party with a pyrokinetic mage, and you come across an enemy that is literally fire, this would allow you to essentially take that fire resistance lower than 100% to allow your fire mage to actually start doing damage again. Because the way it works is if you're at 100% or higher, any fire damage done, if they have 100% or higher on fire resistance, would actually heal the target. So it has some utility in that aspect as well. So I'll keep this lower resistances in the B tier for the reasons that I gave. Next up, we got Malediction. So Malediction is this spell right here. It's a little creepy in my opinion, but oh well. Malediction weakens and curses an enemy. So Cursed lowers a target's chance to hit by 30%, and Weak lowers the target's damage by 50%. So essentially takes one character kind of out of the fight. They do negligible damage, and they're more than likely going to miss because of that. That's soft CC. We'll go ahead and put it in the S tier. It's extremely useful. You get to use this on, the boss character who, say the boss is doing 100, boom, you cast this spell on them. Now they're doing 50. Super useful in that aspect. Keeps your characters alive. We love keeping our characters alive. It's not fun when they go down. Next up is Oath of Desecration. Bestow a damage boost upon an ally. What that means, it increases the damage of the specific target by 40%. So you can use this on summons. You can use it on any of your party characters. It will buff their damage by 40%. That's S tier. It's very clearly S tier. You can have a build where you go like a two-handed swordsman that's going for a critical strike build, and then boom, you cast a 40% increase in their damage. They critically strike. You basically one-shot an enemy. It's super nice getting to use this specific spell because it just ups the amount of damage that is done. You can cast it on an expert marksman, and you'll see the enemy health bars just delete. They delete themselves. It's pretty good. So I'll put that S tier. Next up is the Summon Undead Warrior. Summon a level 8 skeleton in a 10-meter radius for 24 seconds. I've actually seen these things, in my opinion, are also considered soft CC. So they don't CC anybody, but what they do is they make the enemy encounters attack the summon, which could save you some time. And it only has an action point cost of 4. And typically summons cost a little bit more than 4. I think they're like 6 to 7. So this is actually pretty good in my book. And it helps through your early campaign clears, getting to just plop this next to somebody and just deal an extra, couple of rounds of damage. I'd actually put it in the A tier. I think later on you won't be casting this spell, but to help you get through the early game, it does help a lot. And then last up, we have Vampiric Touch. So heal yourself with the life force of someone else, damaging them for XY piercing damage, and it has a 3-meter range. I don't see this as super useful. I'd probably put it in the D tier. If you're running a specific party composition, you're probably going to want to run Hydrosophis anyway. That just has a way better healing arsenal than this specific spell. I know Marksman has like a cure, or Man-at-Arms and Marksman have their own versions of healing spells that are way longer cooldown and they don't heal as much. I think you would just kind of waste it and just use it or when you could just use a Hydrosophis to heal your character. And that is all of the novice spells. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't have to make a decision on it though, because there's 6 novice spells. You can have all 6, so that way you don't have to worry about, which one to take over another one. Next up, we're going to go into the Adept spell tier list, starting with the Destroy Summon, which is this spell here. Deal immense damage to a summoned creature. Knockdown makes a target unable to move or act. Damage dealt depends on your main weapon's damage rating. There are a lot of instances or encounters that have summons, so this is nice for that. But if the encounter doesn't have a summon, which is, I would say, 60 to 70% of the encounters don't have summons, then this spell is useless. So if you look at it in that aspect, 60 to 70% of the time, that spell's dead. It's a dead spell. You can't use it. So I would actually put it in the C tier just because of the situational aspect. Next up, we have the Drain Willpower. S tier. Drain willpower is so good. I'll tell you why. Decrease a target's willpower by -5. So the way the game works, you have bodybuilding and willpower. Each one boosts your resistances to crowd controlling effects. Not build bodybuilding is like knocked down or crippled and things like that. Willpower is like frozen, stunned, etc. Those kind of things. So being able to reduce that on a specific target essentially means that you can automatically CC them the next turn. So if you have a boss, drain willpower, freeze them. Boss, drain willpower, electrocute them. They're done. They can't move anymore because you just drain their willpower. It is so useful. Next up, we have Mute. Mute is a really cool spell, actually. It silences a target. So mute status prevents a character from using any spells or scrolls. So this actually is pretty good because later on you'll have a lot of characters using scrolls to heal each other, or they will be using scrolls to cast like fireballs or other things like that, or they're a mage character and all of their spells come, they have to cast their spells, and this allows them to not cast their spells. It's not a direct CC, because they can still take an action, but it stops them from taking a way bigger action than you would want them to take. So if you have like a fire character or a pyrokinetic character, you cast mute on them, they can't cast fireball anymore. What they'll do is they'll run up to you and hit you with their staff. So they still can hit you, but they don't hit you as much and cause any freaking, any CC abilities as well. So I would put this in the A tier. Next up is Rapture. I put Rapture in the S tier. It charms a target. What does Charm do? Charm essentially, you cast it on somebody. If they are charmed, they fight for you. You get to control them and they fight for you. So you can essentially, if you're on a 4-on-4, you can make it a 5-on-3. That's freaking good. So it needs to be S tier. Next up, we have the Summon Undead Decapitator. Summon Armored Undead Decapitator. Summon a powerful level 8 Skeletal Knight in a 12-meter radius for 30 seconds. What I would say for this guy is 8 action point cost, so he's considerable higher than the Skeletal Warrior. And at this point of the game, when you unlock this guy, I think the summons fall off. Like, this guy's supposed to be like a pseudo tank. If you don't have a tank in your party composition, you can go ahead, run this, and you can use him because this guy has taunt on his skill bar. But if you don't have that, which I think majority of the time you'll run a character who's built for tanking, I don't see this spell super useful, so I'd put it in the D tier. And that actually rounds up our adept spells. And then lastly, we'll go into the master spells, and this is where it gets pretty hard for me because there's 5 of them and they're all pretty freaking good. First up, we'll start with Death Punch. Deal XY crushing damage to a target near you. This is basically Saitama from One Punch Man. So what it does is 100% base chance to cause a status effect knockdown for 2 turns. So you use it and it does CC them. And it does an intense amount of damage. It's kind of like a one-hit kill style of spell. And the fact that it CCs somebody as well is pretty good. It has a very high action point cost, so if you're using this, you'd probably want to use this in your second round of combat where you're done debuffing the enemy and buffing your allies, when you could use this one in the second round to kind of finish some people off or do a second round of knockdown and things like that. I would put it in the S tier. I think it does a considerable amount of damage and it's pretty useful in that way. And the fact that it also CCs somebody is pretty good. The only thing, it has a 3-meter range. So you could run this in tandem with like a Man-at-Arms character, or you can run this with like a Scoundrel who uses teleportation quite often. You can teleport them, death put somebody, and then go invisible. Like, those are things that you can do. That's why Divinity's fun, because you can kind of mix and match everything to make your specific character that you want. But I would put Death Punch in the S tier. Next up, we have Horrific Scream. Obviously, this one looks like it. Make enemies around you cower and flee. It has a 8-meter range. And what fear does is, it essentially, if they become feared, they run away from you. So it's like it's pseudo CC where they don't attack you, and it lets you say if you start the encounter off bad or you get caught off guard, or maybe you're doing a honorman campaign, playthrough, and you're like, oh crap, I can't revert my save. We're about to die. You can cast this and kind of restabilize your party. So I'd actually put this in the A tier. The fact that it doesn't do damage, I don't specifically like, but it does. It has the ability to potentially CC everybody, which is pretty good. And you can combine that with something like drain willpower on a target to automatically make sure at least one of the people get feared. So that's cool. Definitely think it's useful running. Next up is invulnerability. Make yourself invulnerable. Can only be used once per combat. Has a 15-meter range, and then it has a 100% chance to cause status effect invulnerable for 2 turns. Um, I surprisingly enough, I don't necessarily find this spell super useful. The way combat works, the way combat is supposed to work, in my opinion, is you want to CC everybody, deal your damage, and then keep reapplying chain crowd control, essentially. So when you're having to use this, it's like well, I messed up. I didn't do a good job. And yeah, you didn't do a good job. I could see it being used as like, hey, let's cast Invulnerable on one of my allies and just let him tank everything in one turn. Like if you have a tank that has taunt, you can go invulnerability, tank goes, taunt everybody, they all attack him the next turn, so it's another form of CC. But that requires a lot of resources to do that without actually dealing any damage, unless that tank has like shackles of pain or barbed wire that deals damage back to them. I can see that being something. But yeah, I would put this in the B tier. I don't really see it super useful. Next up is Resurrect. This is also one I would put in the B tier. It's situational. The best thing that Resurrect does, so resurrect a dead ally to 50% of its vitality at a location within 10 meters, and it has a 15-meter range. The best thing this does is saves you so much time and frustration buying resurrection scrolls. Oftentimes you'll die a lot in this campaign. You'll die a lot. There are things that if you don't have a perception based character, you don't find a bomb that's laying on the ground, boom, you blow up, that character's probably going to die. Like that's the way this game is built around. It is kind of frustrating, but once you kind of figure it out, it becomes less frustrating. So this takes that and makes it not as frustrating to deal with. However, in combat you're not fighting, or you're fighting, but you're not supposedly supposed to be dying if you're playing it perfectly. So I'd put it in the B tier for that. And then last up is the Soul Sap. Soul Sap, lower all of the target's powers and resistances. Can only be used once per target. Has a 16-meter range, 15 or 16-meter range, and then the target's primary attributes are decreased by 2. Their bodybuilding and willpower abilities are decreased by 5, and all of their elemental and physical resistances are decreased by 50%. So you can use this on a boss and just wipe them out. Basically one-shot them the next turn. I'd put that one in the S tier. I like it a lot. Okay, so that is my spell tier list right here. We'll go through. I'm going to reset it, and I'll pick which spells I would run for my generic, build. We have 6, 4, and 2 to choose from for Novice, Adept, and Witchcraft, or Master. So let's go ahead and do this again. And I'll go ahead and show you guys which ones I would take. So you have to take all of the Novice ones. So let's go ahead and get all those. And then I think it was this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. And then we'll go into the Adept spell. So this is where you actually have to make your first decision. You have to cut one of these spells off. I would cut this one. This one is not useful in my opinion. So we're gonna go with actually the summon, the destroy summon spell, the drain willpower, the rapture, and the mute spell. So 1, 2, 3, 4. These ones are pretty interchangeable, guys. Honestly, they're interchangeable. This one I would say has more. This one you can use it 100% of the time if you want, but you're wasting action points when you could just use this guy because it's 4 instead of 8. So that's how I would run it. And then last up, we have the master spells. I would personally go Death Punch, and I would probably go Soul Sap. If I didn't go this specific, build, I would probably use Horrific Scream instead of Soul Sap. So I would keep Death Punch always, but it's interchangeable between Horrific Scream and Soul Sap. The other ones I wouldn't use. Maybe if you're super frustrated, you can use them like with invulnerability, or you're going for a specific build, you can do that too. Really depends on what playstyle you're going for. But that is it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out through this series that I've done. I have covered all of the classes and all of their spell lists. So I hope you guys enjoy everything that we talked about. And I can't wait. Baldur's Gate 3 is releasing tomorrow. I'm going to be doing a playthrough series, and I will be uploading it to YouTube. I'm going to be trying to do. I think it would make sense for you guys maybe to do 30 to 1 hour installments. I think for me it would be a little easier if I did 1 hour installments. So I'll go ahead and every hour, I play it, I'll stop, cut it up, boom, there you go. There's your playthrough, and we'll go on until we beat the game. I'm super excited for it, guys. It has like 75 to I think like 125 hours of total gameplay. So let's freaking go. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging out. Please subscribe, like the video, comment down below, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.